Oh my god, guys, this is going to be so much fun, at least for me. Um, but I've been looking forward to doing this for quite some time. So, I want to just go through a walkthrough of how I make Wisher World, like how a Wisher World episode comes together. So, the first thing so first of all, like Wisher World, oh god. Usually I don't do intros, but in this one it actually makes sense. So, I'm a Webtoon canvas creator. I have a webtoon called Wish Your World that is finally up. Now, as of making this video, this episode I'm actually working on isn't up. But because this is like episode 5, I think, like it probably won't be up. It'll probably be up soon, and if not, I don't think that like this is really like a super spoilery thing. I don't think it's really going to get in the way of the reading experience, and as you'll see later, I remove your ability to like see the text when I go to talk about like editing it. So things like the characters say aren't going to be spoiled. But if you really don't want to see any of the artwork for future episodes and episode 5 hasn't come out and you know what Wisher World is, which is would be really cool, but you probably don't. Um then that like just maybe watch this video another time after it comes out or just don't watch it. That's fine. But anyway, yeah, everybody has different ways of making their webtoon, and I just want to show mine. This might give some people some ideas of what might be fun to do their own. This might give someone encouragement if they haven't made a webtoon yet and they're thinking about making one. Or this could just be fun to just see how other people make theirs, because there are some things that I make, like how I make my webtoons, that is a little bit out of the ordinary, as you could probably see here from the fact that I have all of my panels actually on a page like this. Um, but first, we're not actually going to start with the artwork. First, I have to talk about how the story is organized. That way, you guys kind of understand when I talk about it later on, so it won't be confusing. So, we're actually going to go to my Webtoon buffer. As of right now, Wisher World only has one update. Like, I'm literally making this video a few days. I think, yeah, like a few days, because it's. So, as you can see here, this is my buffer. And what I want to basically explain is like how Wisher World is actually separated as a story. So, these are the individual episodes, but the largest amount of like story content, like the way it's organized is that there's sagas. Within sagas, there's arcs. Arcs, I'm not actually sure if I'm always going to indicate them within the story, but me as a creator, that's how I separate basically smaller stories that make up larger stories. So I'll explain that when talking about the buffer. And within arcs, we have chapters. Now, this is what you can see here. As you see here, this is Ficadia the Wisher, and it goes all the way to Ficadia the Wisher Part 8. Then we have the Scapegoat of Ruin, and then we have multiple the Scapegoat of Ruin episodes, and then we have multiple the Sword and the Samsonite episodes. So basically, these are chapters. I can actually, wait, I could actually like click on them and show you, because in the beginning, it actually starts off with the chapter name. So in episode 1, we can go into edit and I can show you. Right here, we have the chapter right here, like you'll see. I don't feel like opening a ton of stuff because my computer is old and slow and I don't want it to freeze on me. So, but as you can see right here, actually, let me just open it up because I don't think otherwise you guys can see it. Preview PC. In the beginning of the episode that starts the chapter, it has the number of the chapter and the name of the chapter. And so that's why they're all separated into parts, but they are all part of one chapter, which helps me organize the story. And that's something I'll talk about when it comes to storyboard. So usually, so far, it seems like the chapters will vary in length, like vary how many episodes they end up being. I typically don't really want them to be, we'll see how it is in the future, but as of right now, I like the most is like the first chapter has 8 episodes. Now the number of episodes a chapter ends up becoming isn't planned. It just ends up being how I just end up making content as I go along, and how I decide to separate certain parts of the chapter in order for it to make sense as an episode. But that this one has 8, and then the Scapegoat of Ruin has, I believe, yeah, it has 6, And then this one is most likely going to be longer than the other two. The Sword and the Samsonite is probably going to be longer than the other two. Hopefully not by a ton, but you know, it just is what it is. So that's the way I organize the story. So when I talk about chapters, that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about individual Webtoon episodes. If I talk about Webtoon episodes, I'm talking about just like the episodes and how I upload it. So now we can start talking about the pre-production. So the first part of the pre-production that I have for Wish World, and this is important. It seems like I don't want to go into it too much, but like this is important in talking about when I actually sit down and start just making the episodes, because the fact that a good percentage of the pre-production has been already like is very much planned out means that it's pretty easy for me to just start doing episodes. So a lot of the pre-production, when I first decided that I want to work on Wisher World, it used to be called Wish, so if you hear me like call it Wish or Wisher and multiple things, it's because it had multiple names, but it's called Wisher World. So if you want to look it up, that's its actual name. But when I first decided that I was going to work on this series, this is not like a new idea. I've had the idea of this particular series and made pretty much all the main characters in early high school, late middle school. It was early high school, I think. So I was probably around 14 when I first started having the idea for this. And when about I think last year, like last December, I found like one of my old drawings of Wisher World I worked on a couple years ago, and I don't know, I just got sparked that I really want to work on this series, and I always knew that this would be a series that was really easy to work on, that I probably should, because it just probably is going to be easier to get people into it than some of my series Atom Storm that I want to start with, which is not a problem. I don't regret starting with Atom Storm. But that's when I decided to work on it, and really quickly I started just brainstorming how I want things to go, and I came up with like how many sagas there were going to be. There were things that obviously changed about it over the years. When you have an idea for like nearly 10 years, it changes quite a bit, but a lot of it still is the same at heart. There's a lot of things that like obviously are still it's not completely different, but I came up with the overall story, so I already know where things are gonna go. I even know mostly how the series is going to end. I know the different sagas. So far, there are I've planned 6 sagas. They're gonna vary in length. I don't know how that's gonna end up being when it comes to Webtoon. I don't know how long it's necessarily gonna take me to get to all of them. But so far, I like the pace that I'm working at. But there's going to be 6 sagas, and within those sagas there's going to be multiple chapters, obviously, and lots of episodes. So but I already have an idea of like where the characters are going to be, what's the focus of the story arcs there. Not every single little thing is fleshed out, because I'm in the middle of an architect writer and a discovery writer. A lot of the short-term storytelling and a lot of the meat is things that I come up with as I go along. That way it feels organic and I could let the characters in the world sort of write themselves. But I always have a plan, I always have a direction, I always know generally where things are going to go. I like to improvise, and if I come up with a better idea, I'm not like so stuck on things going like specifically how I written them before for me not to change my mind. But I'm never like starting from zero. I'm never starting from scratch with any of my series, especially with this one. Um and especially since it really just focuses on like you'll see other characters, but it really just has 3 main characters. Those are the ones that we focus on. There are going to be a couple side characters that are like pseudo main characters, but really there's 3 main characters. I know exactly where they're going to go in their life as the story goes on, and so I can write everything around that. And so that's the first part of the pre-production. A good percentage of that isn't completely written down. It's kind of like brainstormed sloppily in my notebook, and most of it's in my head. But that is something that I completely sorted out. And the last thing I'll talk about with the pre-production during that time period, and this happened within like the span of like 4 days, but sometimes it just be like that. But another thing I actually did was the characters. I really sat down and actually wrote stuff out about the characters. Not because I really didn't have a solid idea of who they were. It's because like sometimes as you write things down, you start to like actually taking your ideas and then translating them into actually like writing them down and making things specific sometimes just solidifies it a lot more. You might get more ideas, you might sort of like change a couple things, but helps you remember it and helps it be like very concrete in your mind. That way you don't have a vague idea when writing a character, and you can remember, okay, like when you need to make sure that you're keeping them in character. Um, with the decisions that they do and the things that they say, you don't want to send out mixed messages in your series about what their personality or their goals or things like that. So when it comes to me writing the characters, the main things that I usually put in there is obviously their personality, their values, and their drives, because that's going to be really important with them being active characters. I like to write active characters that control most of what they do in the story. Like I kind of have a pet peeve about like main characters that most of the time they're just reactionary and they get told what to do by other people. I don't like I take the approach that like it's really easy to make um a character that's not reactionary, and it or not always reactionary, because every character is going to have moments where they obviously are reacting to their environment and things around them, but getting like getting a character to like come alive is really just give them lots of choices and then have the choices they make be based on those values and the personality that you gave them. Internal and external struggles are extremely important to keep in mind, so that I could always use any opportunity I can to foreshadow the types of things that they're going to be going through throughout the series. That's really important, obviously, with their character arcs if they have one, because not all characters actually need character arcs. There can be flat characters, but so far most of the characters I've written do have character arcs. And also I like to have characters that always get questioned, like not always literally, but the series constantly like questions their values. It constantly questions their idea of right from wrong, and it constantly like puts them at a test for that. And so you need to have like an idea of what the internal and external struggles will be with them. Their abilities, because that's important to keep, to first off like make sure you don't like have like crazy freaking progression or like have character ability inconsistencies, because like when it comes to an action series, while you're probably all like every single action series, every single like no series is perfect. All these things I'm mentioning doesn't mean that like in execution they're always going to be perfect, but I try to make them still be like obvious and consistent that I'm putting in the work for that. But when it comes to like characters fighting and their abilities, it's really important for there to be a like for you to know where the things about their abilities are concrete, where they are at specific times in the series, what they can and cannot do, where they are flexible, where they are not flexible. Because when it comes to like writing conflict, you want to make sure that like number one, they're not um overpowered to the point where like you really don't want them to be overpowered in that way, like it's like how something gonna hurt them. But at the same time you also want to be like, okay, like how do I make it reasonable that a character like this can do certain things in different situations, so that eventually over time the character and the audience can like have a good idea of what the character's strengths and weaknesses are, especially like physically and mentally when it comes to getting thrown into conflict. What are they good at? What are they bad at? Where are the things that they're going to get better at over time? Where are the things they might even get worse at over time? Um, having a good idea of that is really important. Seeing like writing it down, like seeing how their skill tree sort of balances out with other aspects of their skills or lack thereof, and also more importantly, how they balance out with other characters. When you have like a lot of characters who are like, say, in an action series, and you make a bunch of characters that all like have the same abilities or have every single one of their stats covered, like it can get really boring because it can sort of get repetitive. Like maybe you might have want to have one character that is just generally going to be faster than the rest of the other characters, and that then that way you could sort of also write like how they would work together, what situations would they need to work together. Whereas like another character may be better at hand-to-hand combat, one might be more acrobatic, one might be able to use weapons, another one might not be good at doing that, things like that. So it actually balances out the action, and it makes it like it gives the audience like reasons to maybe want to see certain characters face off against other certain characters, because they're not just all like literal clones of each other who all fight and think in the same way, or all like all face conflicts in the exact same way. And like also like when they do work together, like how's that going to play out, like who's going to be using what skills and things like that. So that's why like writing their abilities is important, even characters that have really simple abilities. I don't think I ever, like, so far I don't have any like series or characters that get anywhere near complex as like a complex magic system or something like Hunter x Hunter. So far, oddly, I haven't really been interested in magic system. Also, I really like hand-to-hand combat, so most of it sort of comes down more to almost like a martial artsy sort of thing. Like it's but there are probably going to be magic systems with other things, and like there could be multiple magic systems. Like I'm just using the term magic system, doesn't mean it's actually magic, but like whenever you have like a system of power within a story, like that's what I mean. But um and I haven't like shown this so far, but like with Atom Storms, for example, because it's like a series that's based, like, it's sci-fi, there's not like really like magic or anything, but there's like technological systems and things like that, like that have certain rules, or biological ones that have certain rules. But um yeah, so far Wish doesn't really have that. Characters aren't really like, I mean, it sort of does, but I don't know. I don't know. It's not like in like a sort of like, okay, like this is, I don't know. You guys could see how it is. I don't know, but yeah, that's just the abilities. And the last one, which is really important, is like their relationships and their chemistry in those relationships, along with how that is in context with like their role in the story. So usually when I write a character, I not only like will write about them, or like if I write it down, or if I'm just thinking about, but I really like to think about how when a character is put in like in a relationship with another character, not necessarily like romantic, I mean it could be romantic, but like any type of relationship, any other characters that have a major like contribution to their lives, like what's their relationship with that person, and also what type of traits does that person bring out of them, because people act differently around different people. You might like it would be completely normal, because I've seen like some people kind of treat characters like they're static and make it seem like someone is out of character if they act one way around one character and completely different around another one. And that's like completely normal. That's like you don't act the same when you're hanging out with your grandma, the same that you act with your best friend. So depending on who they're around, like it might bring out different personality traits. It might exacerbate some, it might make some more docile. So, and also like how's that character have like effects on their goals? Like, are they in conflict? Are they helping them? Um, is their presence like encouraging them? And how much of it is like conscious with the characters? Because like certain things like a character might be aware of, but then there's a lot of writing that goes into like, kind of like showing what they're not aware of, but you as the audience can see it. So that's something that I did when I first started doing the series. That got me like really like writing it out got me really excited. And the reason I really did this, I mean, actually I did do it for Amazon too a long, long, long time ago though, because it's been so long since I actually like legit started Amazon. Because I started it like a year, like the Webtoon version. I started like a year before it actually became online. Just like this one, like I start things like in advance, but um when I actually first started making the series, like all the way back in like 2013 or 14, I actually started by not as a comic, but I actually like wrote it out. And and so that's why writing it is kind of normal for me. Like I actually wrote out like almost like a storybook, and I was showing it to one of my old friends from middle school. So I was actually writing it out to sort of present to someone else. So it was almost like a proof, like not a proof of concept, but like that's just like how it was. So uh that is probably why a lot of the ideas for the series are very concrete, because that's actually how it started out. So that's the only real that's a big pre-production. That's like the overall like large goal type pre-production. So then I'm gonna talk about the last part of pre-production. It's already freaking 20 minutes, but the part that you're probably going to be hearing about the most whenever I do an episode, because that's like all that stuff I just talked about, that happened only like within a few days. I haven't done anything like that in like the past few months or something like that. I think I've written run from for like I've written stuff for like a couple other characters, but most of that stuff isn't where I'm doing like on a regular basis for an episode. But it is important because if I didn't do that, I'm not sure it'd be as easy to just work on episodes without having already done something like that. But um now we're gonna get into like the real pre-production that comes to making an episode of Wish. So that is the storyboards. I storyboard the entire, like basically the entire chapter, or have like a really good idea of like what an entire chapter is most of the time before I even start on that chapter. So like all of this, let me show you all of this, like this story all the way till here, like all the panels that happen in here, or basically all the story, because I do improvise as I go along. All of this I storyboarded within the course of like 1 to 2 days in my like notebook. And that's what I pretty much do for like every single chapter. I storyboard it all at once, and the reason I do it in like a notebook instead of like digitally, and sometimes I have done some of the storyboards for fight scenes later on digitally because I just happened to have that open, and I was like, I might as well just do it here so I could just draw straight on top, like on top of it later. But most of the time I do it in my notebook, and the reason for that is because that means I could do it anywhere. Like I can do it at work, on my breaks, and I could do it in my room, I could do it down the basement, like I could just do it anywhere. And it also, like, it's not really polished. It's like the reason I would probably never really show my storyboards, and maybe I could scan them, I don't know, I'm looking at them now and they don't look as unreadable as I thought, but like generally they are extremely unreadable to anyone but me. They're, a lot of times the panels are completely out of order, and only I know the true order that they actually go in. There might be a bunch of different like arrows everywhere because I wrote the dialogue for one panel in a different spot, and then I have to put an arrow pointing it to another panel. Like they do not look like anything near any sort of like anything professional. They look like scrapbook like crap. And they probably have all sorts of other stupid drawings around them that is irrelevant to the actual storyboard itself. But they work for me. I like working in this sort of loose fashion, and it helps me turn them out really quickly. And I really like them. I have a lot of fun with them. It allows me to just get like all my ideas out really quickly. So basically, every time I sit down to do an episode, I already know everything that's going to happen. I already know almost every single panel I need to draw. And so when I start an episode, I just go, okay, what was the last panel I left off at? And I just continue working on it. So now I will show you the actual process. Yay, or like 20 minutes in, and like we're finally getting to like the actual good stuff. Okay. So first, what do I actually use to draw Wish episodes? I have a Huion Canvas Pro 12. I have a crappy old little laptop that is holding on to dear life, but I still love it to death. I will have to eventually replace it, but as of right now, it does its job. And to actually draw the panels, I use Pharaoh Alpaca. Now, this isn't actually how I typically put them together, but I will explain the editing process later. So the first thing you'll probably notice is that all of these episodes, all these panels are drawn on the page. Now, I don't always draw panels on the page like this. Sometimes I do, especially if it's like sort of action oriented. It's kind of fun to do it. And I also kind of like the idea of the fact that if I ever want to make it in a page format, I can do both the webtoon and the page format. So what I sometimes will do is I'll draw in the page format while still thinking in the back of my head exactly how it's going to look in the scrolling format to get the best of both worlds. So that's why this is drawn like this, but not every single panel is. So the episode that I'm going to show you is episode 3. No, episode 5, my bad. So, first I can sort of will show you how I organize things. So, I actually draw everything on my flash drive. I make all the files on my flash drive because, like I said, my computer is old, and so if it decides to give, all of my information is back on the flash drive. I've invested in buying just a lot of really big flash drives, and that's what I'm using. The reason I'm not using a cloud is like I do use a cloud, I back things up on the cloud, but I'd rather have it like concretely just like on a flash drive. Something I could access at any time, anywhere, and I just sort of like saving it straight onto here. So, this is Wish's folder. This is all of its stuff. I could probably go into this stuff a different time, but the most important thing that you'll see here are these two folders. I have episode drafts and episodes. Now, when you go into them, they look exactly the same, except episode drafts basically has every single thing that I use to make an episode, and the episodes themselves only have the final files that I use to upload on Webtoon. So if you go into the episode 5 for the episodes folder, the only thing we have on here is the actual scroll that goes onto Webtoon. Before Webtoon had the whole, like, before Webtoon decided to like break up the panels themselves, I would have to have these. So I had those. And I have the thumbnail. I have the thumbnail and the end card. So basically, it makes sure that number one, I have a folder just for finished things, and it makes sure that I never end up uploading something that I'm still working on like publicly. So this stuff only has files that actually get uploaded online, having to do with the episodes. Whereas when you go into episode drafts, it almost has everything the same, except I have a couple extra things here, but they're pretty much the same. And you go into episode 5, and instead I have the files for the individual panels that I draw. So as you can see, not all of the panels are actually drawn in page format. It's just occasionally I'll draw them in page format. So these are the actual files, and then when I save them, I put all of the PNGs here, so you can see how many these are something else. They just ended up making them for us. These are the sketches. But you could actually see like how many panels I usually work on per episode. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. This one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you know, I didn't even count right. Anyway, because I'm like looking at my mouse. But as you can see, so I have that, and then I have the file where I edit them all together. So that's where we're pretty much going to go in step by step. And I just want to have a couple files open already for you guys to sort of see the types of ways I'll draw it. So for example, this one is just like its own thing. It's not in a page format. So I guess I'll start with answering the question of why I don't just draw straight on the page. There's a couple reasons for this. But first off, I just like it better. I just find it a lot more fun to have individual like things finished. But I guess I could separate into first talking about flexibility. One criticism that I have, and I don't think that it always ends up happening. I think a lot of people get around it, and I even think that it might not be in the end of the world if I do it. But when you draw straight onto the like if you draw straight onto like this sort of scrolling thing, there's a couple things that you don't get when you do this. Number one, it means that you can't do anything else with the pictures. Like if I want to use the pictures for something else, it's really easy to just go in here and just okay, I'm going to use this picture for a thumbnail. I'm going to use this picture for promotion. I'm going to edit this together into a video. Like they're all here. They're individual finished just works that I can use for anything else. So if I want to make them into a page format, if I want to do anything else with them, I have all of these separate pieces here. There's no text on them. There's none of that. And I can use the individual artwork for itself. If I draw it on the scrolling feature that's already on here, then every time I want to use them, I'd have to like either use the full thing or have to go in and like crop in. Like that's just like extra stuff. I just kind of like having things broken down into pieces so that when I want to reorganize them, I can, or just use them for different things, have versatility, I can do that. So another thing though is that when it allows me to basically do whatever I want with the panels. I like panels being in different shapes. I like really just getting into the panels themselves. And one thing that happens when you're, especially I seem to notice this with a lot of people who are new. Again, this criticism isn't for everyone, and I'm not even saying that I would necessarily fall trap to this, but the fact that this is a vertical like canvas, people tend to draw based on the canvas that you give them. So if you give them a canvas that is shaped like this, at least for me, I'll fill the space in a shape like this. I will fill the shape in a space like this. and it's still vertical, so it's not going to make me make something that's like too hard to fit onto Webtoon, but it's going to make sure that I'm not zooming in too much. And one thing that I tend to notice about a lot of Webtoon panels is that sometimes it feels like they're zoomed in way too much. They don't give things room to breathe. Because like it seems like the way it's drawn is like to focus on filling in all the space, but it might be zoomed way too much into someone's face. It might be obscuring the action because too much of the body is cut off so they could, fill up the space. And I just prefer not to do that. I really like allowing the panels to just make sense based on what it's actually showing. I'm not saying that this is even the most Webtoon integrated way. I understand that it doesn't even, like, there are other series that do better with Webtoons format. This is just the balance that I prefer using Webtoons format. This is me going sort of halfway as someone who likes the perks that come with being in a page format, or a format where everything doesn't have to be scrunched into this vertical format, but still something that can, at the end of the day, end up translating well, I think, fine enough into Webtoons. So, that's why I do that. And I just generally, also another thing is that I like all the images to be as high quality as possible. So one issue that I had when I was working on Atom Storm, when I first started to make a couple episodes that were digital or had digital panels, is that when I did want to draw on the scrolling canvas, like this long scroll canvas, um I obviously wanted it to be really high quality because Webtoon size is pretty small. And so if you draw something just on here, it's not going to be high quality. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to make the canvas bigger. However, this is already a pretty long canvas. Even if you make it something shorter than this, it's a pretty long canvas. So what can end up happening is, especially on a really old computer like mine, is that when you make it too big, it can start making it, like, drawing on it a pain in the butt. It might start lagging. It might take longer for you to save, because every time you save, you have to save all of this content, not just one panel. And it can become a pain. So drawing them individually and then moving them on there and just resizing them, I just find a lot easier. I'll talk more about that process in the editing phase, but that's just like, I'm pretty sure it's like the first question someone might have when they see something like this, is like, why isn't it just drawn on the scroll? That's why. Those are the many reasons why. I probably have more, but just at the end of the day, I just prefer doing this. I like to just draw I just like to draw and just focus on the panel itself, and then I throw it together. So yeah, we can go into these. So as you can see, the panels still, like, say whenever I want to save it, I still draw the panels separately, and then I just, go like this, da, 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 and then I just crop it and I just save it. That's how I save it. Um, as you can see right here, oof, what'd I do? Here we go. Now they're all back. As you can see with, we have another one like this. So, one thing you can see is, like, as of right now, I use a program called Fire Alpaca. So the reason I use Fire Alpaca is that so far it is the most convenient and only free drawing program that works on my computer. The other ones work, but I can't draw on them because I have, like, it will have pen lag or some sort of glitch in there. And I think it has to do with my computer and not the program themselves, because every time I look up any way that people have figured out how to get rid of those problems, it for some reason doesn't work on my computer. And I have heard of people getting a new computer, and even though there's nothing wrong with their tablet and there's nothing wrong with the program, the fact that, like, when they get a new computer, that they'll notice that their pen precision is a lot better. So it's possibly that it's my computer. I don't know why, but I just didn't want to use Photoshop anymore, which is what I was using before I started working on Wisher World. When I moved to this is just a lot easier. So I do pretty much use the bare bones. The only brushes that I use, and you won't see here because I didn't start using watercolor until later on the series, but I pretty much just use the marker and Fluffy. Like, that's all I use. Now, since I don't have any special fancy things, I just have to use what, like, just do what I'm good at. Like, I don't really need a lot of fancy stuff. Like, yeah, it probably could look flashier, but the whole purpose of Wish Your World, and this is something I probably should have mentioned when it came to production, the whole purpose is that I need to be able to make it fast. I need to be able to make it easy with not like a lot, like a ton of effort. And I like that's the whole purpose of it. Like it's something I chose to work on this series instead of Adam Storm during this time in my life because I have quite a bit of other responsibilities and I'm just at a point where like I need to work on the series because when I don't work on my comics, I go insane. Like seriously, I have to work on like a comic. I don't enjoy being alive if I'm not working on a comic. So I had to choose a series that is going to be reasonable to work on while I'm going to work and while I'm still in school. So that's why I chose Wisher World. So when I first started it, and I still sort of have this rule now, but it's not as strict, is that I cannot take longer than 4 days to make any amount in any episode. And once I'm done, I'm done. I move on to the next one. And I realized that helped me be a lot more productive. And, like when I need to cut things off, I just cut things off. That's the episode, it's the end. I might try to, tailor things to where like it makes sense for the episode to end there. But the whole purpose of my production is for it to be quick and easy. So I don't really need I'm not really focusing on Wish necessarily looking the flashiest or looking like the coolest webtoon on there. It looks good enough for me. I like it. I have a lot of fun with it. So I don't really mind just not using a ton of effects and anything like that. As you can see here, I don't really know if I still have the sketches for this one, but I did want to show you guys what some of my sketches look like. So let me move this down here so you guys can see. So remove this because this is the actual panel. But this is what some of my sketches tend to look like. So this is a sketch for this, but as you could actually see, the original storyboard that I made actually had her in this pose. So at first I drew her in this pose, which still looks kind of cool. Who knows? Maybe I'll go back and draw and just use it for something else. But I realized I didn't really like that. It didn't feel as big enough. Like it didn't feel as like impactful enough. So I kind of wanted this more focused, zoomed in pose, and I wanted to have her hand at more of an angle because I just thought it looked cooler than it just being in front of her face. Like just straight in front of her face from like camera angle. So yeah, I had this one, and this is probably one of the last panels I drew. So I was like, I'm not even gonna color it traditionally. Let me just throw this over it. It's just gonna be blue, and I ended up actually liking that because it has a nice transition into the panel after this, which is all blue. So yeah, those are the panels. That's how I make my panels. I use Fur Alpaca. Fur Alpaca's pretty chill. As you can see, it's pretty lightweight. But you know what? I like lightweight because it means that I don't have issues with it freezing. I don't have issues with anything like that. It's really easy to, just draw on here. So, I really don't need anything fancy, in my opinion. So, as of right now, I don't really plan on moving to anything else except for probably Medibang in the future because Medibang is just a better version. It's just like a better version of this. It has more brushes. Like I said, most of these brushes are unusable. Like look how ugly this is. Wait, look how ugly this is. I don't know. Can you even see it? Can you see it? Wait, why isn't it showing it? Maybe it's because I'm not on my. Maybe it's because I'm not on my tablet. I don't know why it's not like showing it. Oh wait, is it because it's white? Let me see. Yeah, it's just I don't know why. I don't know what it's doing. But anyway, yeah, those brushes are ugly as sin. I will never use these. They big ugly. Most of them. So yeah, this is what I do. So then I make the PNGs. So now I'll show you how the editing process works. So for editing, I use Medibang. Now I just talked about how I freaking love Medibang. Why don't I draw on it? Like I said, I can't draw on it because there's a freaking pen lag on it. Otherwise, I would be using Medibang all day, every day for everything. So, I don't draw on it. But it basically functions as every single thing I used to do on Photoshop, except for it doesn't come with all the features that I don't need. So I basically use it like a lightweight Photoshop. I used it both for when I was working on Atom Storm post post October 2020. I used it for Atom Storm when I edited that together. So basically, as you can see, what I have is, here, let me just get rid of text. I have the art. So all of the art goes in this folder. Basically, I just throw all of the panels in here. This was the original episode, but then I will talk about the other part when we talk about like post-production. So yeah, basically I just throw all of them on here. Now, there's actually some other really great things about the fact that they're just individual like PNGs instead of like whole panels with folders and stuff. First of all, I don't name my panel like my I obviously don't name my layers when I draw very well. Things are just folder this and layer this. I don't care. It doesn't really matter. I don't have time to name all that shit. So I don't need to worry about moving all of that. It's nice just moving an actual PNG. So the PNGs can be as high quality as possible, so they end up being like this big. But I just I just make them smaller, and that way I can really be in control of how I want them oriented. I can, if I ever want to rearrange the panels from the original order originally had them, it's so much easier this way compared to if they were actually just all drawn on here and had their own folders that I had to move around, all things like that. It's so much easier to just organize the story. Now, I have two of these. These are both for the episode. This is just the first piece, and this is the second piece of the episode. So that's why there's two of these. But yeah, that's one great thing. It's really easy to reorganize things, because especially if I'm like, you know what, I wanted this panel to actually come here or this panel to go there, I could just go there, move it around, we're good. There's no huge folder that I have to move to. So when I move all of these on here, I don't actually have these bubbles at first. At first it just looks like this. As you can see, I drew this within the actual, like, in that actual panel itself. This is probably one of my favorites. I love doing shit like this. So this is the stuff where I add text, bubbles, and sound effects. Now, sometimes I will use Medibang sound effects, and Medibang actually has a lot of nice fonts. I will show you the fonts I use if it will, like, here we go. So this is the font I usually use for people talking. This is CC Wild World. I really like to sort of just have like a really cartoony font. It goes with my art style. It's really important to have a font that goes with your art style and the vibe of your series, as well as being very visible. Text, but I'm making it so small you can't really see. Oh shit, you still can sort of see it. Oh well. So then I put all the text in there and I organize for the text I want. Then I usually go back onto Final Pocket to actually draw the bubbles, but I like to draw my own bubbles. I like the bubbles to be in the same exact like art style as mine. I really prefer the bubbles to be like that. I'm just like very much, I like to draw my own bubbles. So that's just how it is. I don't even think that there's like pre-made bubbles on here anyway, but I just like drawing mine so much more. They just mesh into the comic a lot better. I don't know what else to say. The bubbles aren't too fancy, but when it comes to the sound effects, I freaking love making my own sound effects. Now, I don't always have time to draw my own sound effects, but this is probably, like, I love this one. This was fun to draw. And it also, like, it can make sure, like, the sound effects are, like, kind of going with the flow of, like, the panels, like, how this sort of flows down here like that. This is probably one of my favorites. And I didn't really talk too much about the art because I don't have time to go into freaking everything, but yeah, Ficadia does have, I guess it's like a trope of mine, like an art trope of mine, where, like, my main characters have, like, very, specific styles in their hair, like I guess like almost like ornamented hair, but yeah, I love drawing Ficadia's hair like this. It's not drawn in this much detail in every single panel because that would take forever. Sometimes I do simplify it, but this is how like the hairstyle is supposed to be. I freaking love drawing this. I love like just calling somebody and just like going into doing this, or like while I'm listening to music. It's very, very cathartic. It's like very stress relieving drawing her hair. And I just really like the volume that it has in this panel. This is probably like one of my favorite panels, even though it's like so simple. So yeah, I think that's most of the editing. This episode oddly doesn't really have a lot of sound effects, so I can't talk about that too much. Unfortunately, there's just not a lot of sound effects in this episode, but I feel like it has most of what I'd want to talk about in the episode. Let's see, let's zoom in. Yeah, so, and like I said, like I still think about how it's gonna look in the vertical format while I'm still drawing it separately. So most of the time, I think it still fits in there really well. Like, these obviously look good in vertical, in my opinion. Like, I mean, they're already, like, vertically shaped, but I was able to make sure, like, okay, like, we get full shots that, like, do not feel, like, overly zoomed in, and I think the fact that it wasn't originally drawn just straight in here is what allowed it to do that. Because, yeah, so, anyway, that is that. So obviously I export this out as PNGs. Usually ends, so that's when we go to, I export it into the episode. So we go to episode 5 of chapter 1, and we get these two files. So we get these two, and this is what goes into Webtoon. So let's go back to the actual episode. This is so long. This is so boring to probably most people will never watch this, but if you do, here it is. It's here. It exists. And as you can see, it's the schedule for December. And, you know, I just toss it into Webtoon. So that's the nice thing about having shorter episodes. I no longer have to fight Webtoon to fit them all in there now. So what happens after this? Well, obviously I upload the episode, but the fact I have a buffer means that I can do post-production. So that's why I want to talk about the post-production. This episode is actually one of the few that have post-production edits in here. Not one of the few. I do post-production quite a bit, but this one has it. It's like more obvious. Like it's something that I actually can remember, because I do so many like little edits sometimes as I go back. And that's something that's just, you know, when you have a buffer, it can just really help, because since you already can be like, oh, I see all of where the comic is going, then you could go back and like, maybe I want to add content there, maybe I want to fix things, maybe I see another opportunity to foreshadow something, I can put that in there. But originally, this panel wasn't here. Now, it does look kind of shitty, but I did feel like I need a transition here where we see the sword and it almost pokes her and then she jumps away. That's all that is. There are probably other post-production things, like me changing some of the dialogue to be slightly different. Not hugely different, but like slightly different. Like the way characters say things is kind of like very specific for me. But anyway, that has post-production in it. So that's why this says edition top. Those weren't originally in there. I threw them in there. This is a panel from the last episode, so this isn't new. And yeah, so that's what is like working on a Wish episode. So time-wise, this usually takes, like I said, about no more than 4 days. Now that I'm more relaxed and I just kind of do things as they go along, I just like no episode, and the fact that I'm not drawing it with Adam Storm, because when I was working on these panels, like I mean these episodes, most of this stuff I was actually drawing Adam Storm while I was doing it. So that means I had to make this while also drawing Adam Storm. So I was very, very strict on myself with how long it could take me to do an episode. So I really prioritize speed. Now, since Wish is the only series I'm working on, I'm kind of fine if it just takes about a week. It should never take longer than a week. Like, usually it takes between, the shortest time I've actually done, I actually have turned out an episode in just one day. I've even done as much as, like, turned out, like, the 36 panel episode in 2 days. But most of the time, I'd say it takes me no longer than 5 days. And if I'm really, really, like, like on my game, I can, like, make an episode in, like, 1 or 2 days. But it depends on what I'm doing at the time. Depends on if I'm at school, if I'm on school or I break, if I have to like do other things while I'm doing it, or if I get an entire day while that I could just work on Just Wish. That really all depends on how long it actually ends up taking to finish an episode. But generally, it takes about 2 to 3 days to actually draw everything. I usually might, if it doesn't have, it depends on the dialogue too. Like sometimes I take a day off just to do the dialogue so I don't rush it. That usually only takes an hour, but sometimes I don't want to cram in doing the dialogue in the same day I just finished drawing everything and editing everything together. Um, but if it's something that doesn't have a lot of dialogue, like some of these episodes I get to work on now, I get to just focus on just making like everything look fucking crazy good. Especially since I'm doing like the fighting scenes now, which is so much fun. I don't want to spoil those, so I'm not gonna click on those. But um, yeah, as I go along, I do think like I start to make my art look a little bit flashier because it's like, why not? I don't really have to rush as much anymore. And when it comes to the fighting scenes, I do just kind of want to give it extra flair because that's what the comic is about. Like, I freaking love drawing fights. So, right now, I don't have to do as much dialogue, but I do like to take my time a bit more on the action scenes. So, um, it's just like I keep things flexible, but generally they don't take. None of them have ever taken me more than a week. So that's what it's like making Wisher World. I think that I pretty much covered just about everything. If there's any other things that you guys want me to go more into detail about, like how I don't know, like the way I panel or like art style choices or things like that, you guys can ask. But as of right now, the video's already long enough, and I'm like a nobody, so I'm pretty sure nobody actually wants to watch something this long. But hey, it's here. It's here if anyone is curious. And I had a lot of fun. So see you guys later. And if you're a webcomic creator, like, good luck. It's really fun. So yeah, I hope you're having as much fun as I am.